If you have ever experienced low expectations at the IEP table as a parent or as a teacher for your child or students who have complex support needs, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and I've been reading a book that I need to tell you about. In fact, I love it so much, I'm going to read you some things directly from the book because the author says it's so great. The author has actually brought up some things that have not been said out loud, like in a book, out to the masses, and I was just cheering her on. I was like, yes, we need this. Actually, it was written by two individuals, and the name of the book is Equitable and Inclusive IEPs for Students with Complex Support Needs. So very important. You'll see there I have a bunch of sticky notes that are all over it, things that I just want to tell you about this book. I'm hoping that if this has been your experience, if I describe some of these things and you're like, yes, that's what's happening in my school district, that you go run onto Amazon. I'll have the link there for you. Grab the book and get the ideas, the tools, the printouts, the downloads, the strategies, the perspective that these two authors bring to you in this book about inclusive IEPs for students with complex needs. In fact, I'm going to share with you the intro, which is written by Andrea, one of the authors, as she brings up some great just perspective and talk and honesty about our special education system. And I share my perspective on these topics all the time. And to have somebody else put this in writing, I was like, yeah, see, I'm not the only one as I'm out here sharing with you, and I'm just sharing with teachers and parents that I've been working with for decades. I'm like, this is something that we need to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Let me share with you some of the things that need to be talked about and need to be changed. So this is from Andrea, again, the author of this book. It says, special education as a system is designed to be flexible, providing educational teams and families options for arranging individualized supports and services for students with disabilities in school. But when special education became legally mandated in 1975, many students with complex support needs were not attending school at all. The lucky few students who were permitted to attend school were sent to separate buildings and classes with age-inappropriate materials and activities. If instruction was occurring, students were learning skills normally taught to toddlers, even as they progressed through elementary and high school. Categories of TMH, trainably mentally handicapped, SMH, severely mentally handicapped, and PMH, profoundly mentally handicapped, were applied to students based on an educator's perception of their functioning level. Although TMH students were considered capable of learning basic daily living skills, students in the SMH and PMH categories were considered custodial and therefore unable to benefit from education. Let's stop there just for a minute. You might think, thanks for the history lesson, Catherine. No, it's not that far in the past. So special education came about in 1975. Andrea here, the author, she's talking about this is how it was in 1975. But here's the deal. I got my teaching certificate in the 90s. In fact, I was born in 1975. That means I'm 48 years old. Ideal law, 48 years old. Okay, not that long ago. That means that my age, we are in the school system right now as the first generation of students who went to school with children with disabilities. We're the first generation, okay? My brother, who was born in 1977, is the first generation of adults with disabilities who were able to attend school and get a full education. So it's really important for us to understand that this isn't so far in the past. Like, I'm a product of this system, of this law coming about when I went into the school system, when my brother went into the school system. Now, as she goes on, she says the field of special education advanced to the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. But as it advanced, the assumptions about the capabilities of students with complex needs persisted. And then she goes on to talk about that in 2004, she took a job at a therapeutic day school in Chicago, meaning that it's a school that it was a public school, but it was all for students who had disabilities. She's talking about 2004. And I'm like, yeah, my kids were born in 2002, 2003. So she's talking about my children, their generation, like being in the schools and what's happening. She talks about the segregation and how when she was at that school and it wasn't the best situation. And one day, I'm going to read exactly what she says. Okay. She says, first she talks about how students who attended the school required extensive supports throughout the school day and were sorted into special classes based on their disabilities. autism, physically handicapped, and yes, PMH. So those are the negative terms that we just talked about that were happening in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and in 2004. Okay, so one day, an 11-year-old at her school drove his electric wheelchair down a flight of stairs when nobody was looking. The medics carried him out of the school on a backboard, and I knew I needed to find a solution to segregation. It took something traumatic to happen for her to say, maybe this isn't right. Maybe what's happening is not right. Now, as we go on and talk about these things, I absolutely believe in a full continuum of placements. I do. But segregation that does not support a child in having a thriving life afterwards, where there's not the services being delivered as they're supposed to be, then this is a big problem, right? So there are absolutely the need for intensive services, but how can we do this differently? So I'm going to continue with Andrea's story because this is good. Okay. She says, in her years as a special educator, she noticed that each district approached students with complex support needs in different ways. That's still very, very true today. Some districts had special schools, like the one where she was teaching. Others had special districts, special classes, or simply special teachers. I eventually taught in a district that had no separate classes or spaces. Every space and experience was available for students with and without disabilities. Here, I supported students who had the same needs as the students that she taught in that segregated school, but she was supporting them in an environment that had no separate classes. She had never worked in an environment like this. She said, I was the only thing that was special about their special education. And I realized maybe I wasn't so important after all. It led to an identity crisis for her. She was trying to figure out as a professional, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm so used to having this self-contained classroom, and we have, just kind of these exclusive communication systems where they're not integrated throughout the entire school. Or there's different systems that are set up in a classroom that are not translating into the general school community. So she had to calculate what is her role as a teacher and how is she going to support her students in this environment. She said by translating this, she had to figure out how she wasn't the do-it-all teacher and figure out all pieces of the education, but she actually had to come together with other teachers who have other areas of expertise and figure out how to collaborate and create this innovative, inclusive experience for all students, even those with the most complex, highest support needs, that we need to make sure that they got the resources that they needed as students. And, one of her goals with this, and I love this, is to get the resources out to the teachers, out to the parents, because it's the parents and the teachers who are going to be making, this possible for the child. Now, throughout her looking at this, how do I create this resource for parents, and how do I really describe what I've been doing and making sure that I'm translating this well, right? I went from a self-contained teacher to a lot of times in our schools, we call them like inclusion support specialists, kind of teacher. How do I describe this, and what is the process? And throughout this, she came up with 3 core principles that really are the foundation of creating inclusive IEPs for students with complex needs. And I love these 3 core principles, and they apply to every IEP, okay? So 3 core principles. The first one is dignity, that every IEP needs to be written with the intention of dignifying the child. So let me just explain what she means by that, because I love her definition of this. So with dignity, if the IEP is dignifying, okay, decisions are made that acknowledge and celebrate the inherent dignity of each student. These decisions value the intrinsic worth of each person, and educators avoid decisions that aim to cure, fix, or otherwise conform. Dignity acknowledges that disability is a natural form of human diversity, and labeling negative attitudes and practices that only target remediation diminish the dignity by perpetuating a view that disability is somehow negative or shameful, rather than a rich expression of human variation that drives creativity, innovation, and personal growth. That is a beautiful definition of how to really have a filter of, is this IEP dignifying for the student? Her second core principle is inclusive, of course, right? We need to make sure that this is inclusive. Every decision is weighed against the likelihood that the consequences of the decision will result in inclusive lives and opportunities. Inclusive lives and opportunities, not an inclusive classroom, not just an inclusive, science class, not just an inclusive, recess, inclusive lives. Like, we're building lives through IEPs. I love that so much. I talk all the time about how we have to look at this big picture of preparing students for further education, employment, independent living. Ideal law says so. So inclusive lives is what we're looking at. We need to seek solutions that enhance inclusive opportunities in our schools, our homes, and our communities. Separation and segregation are avoided at every turn. We urge teams to look for solutions to facilitate robust inclusion in all aspects of life. Like, yes. Yes. Okay. Are you guys excited yet? Like, are you excited about this concept of this is possible? This is not just theory. There are so many examples in this book of how this is put into play, but let me just share with you the third core principle, and that's ambitious. And again, this word ambitious, the authors of this book have really beautiful word choices. So ambitious. As noted earlier, for far too long, people with complex support needs have been the recipients of woefully low expectations, which has resulted in their segregation and poor economic, social, and health outcomes. Truth. Such truth in that. So we envision a world which people with complex support needs receive high-quality academic instruction in schools, participate in healthy and robust friendships and relationships, and direct their own lives and supports. Yes. I'm like, preach, tell it how it needs to be for our students who have been left out of so much, that we need to make sure that there is change and that we have different expectations. Now, again, you're going to have to get the whole book to see all of the strategies, all the things that are in there. It's really important for you to know that you, as a parent or as a teacher, can be the voice at the IEP table to bring these strategies, and don't wait till you get to the IEP table, okay? There are so many strategies that you can do before, during, and after a meeting. Big decisions or big new perspectives like this shouldn't be brought to the IEP table for the first time. If you're like, I want to start using this as a filter, I want more dignity, more inclusion, more ambitious IEPs for all students. If you're a parent, you're like, for my child that people give up on, for my child that people are sorting into a classroom based on what they assume my child can and cannot do. If you're ready to change that, you have to get prepared with this information and start this communication and this team building. In fact, I'm going to give you one last parent perspective, and that's another thing. This book is built for teachers, but parents, here's the thing. If you want to know what's possible for teachers, then you read some teacher books on what teachers are learning or could be learning, or what's possible from a teacher's perspective, to get to know, what are some other creative things that you could be asking for. That's what you would use this book for as a parent. And as a teacher, you're going to look at this and go, yes, like, these are the things that I've been looking for to validate how you've been feeling on the inside of, there has to be something else that I could be doing. Now, I'm going to close this out here with this parent's perspective. And it's a note from somebody, from one of the families that's featured in this book, talking about how she was learning to advocate. So this is Joanne, and this is Joanne, the other author. So it's Andrea, and then there's actually Joanne is the mom. Let me look at my notes here. Johanna is the mom, and our authors are Andrea and Jennifer. Okay, so they're sharing that the family member about the advocating experience. All right, and it says, I remember vividly my first IEP meeting when my husband and I went nervously in to sit down with a table full of people we didn't know, to embark on a process we didn't understand, on behalf of our just turned 3-year-old daughter, Miriam, who we didn't know how to educate. It would be hard to call that first IEP a collaboration. We knew we were supposed to advocate for Miriam, but we were outnumbered and underinformed, and we didn't even know what a good IEP in that situation was supposed to look like. That's so true. You see, the parents went in. How can you collaborate? How can you be equal if you don't have information, right? And you can't have all the same information as the IEP team, like in that first meeting, right? So everybody has their area of expertise. But the parents at this point have not developed their own expertise to bring to the table in this capacity. So the parent goes on to say that Now Miriam is a high school junior and we collaborate for real. She says, I have become involved in education and disability advocacy professionally, which has improved our power dynamics. Now, power dynamics, that might be like, oh yeah, like the parents trying to be powerful at the IEP table in a bad way. No, powerful or being empowered and feeling like you can collaborate and be part of the team is very important. Power doesn't have to mean a struggle. Being empowered means that you could be educated, informed, and able to communicate. Okay. The degree of collaboration versus flailing or confrontation has varied from year to year, though, depending on the approach and the willingness of the school team around the table. When the team is invested in collaboration, parents and school, it can be a beautiful thing. I find myself advising parents to keep bringing their love and their knowledge about their students to the table and keep looking for creative problem solving possibilities and areas of agreement to build on. Areas of agreement to build on. That's so important. We talk about this all the time inside of our Master IP Coach community. And as Fred Rogers famously said, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers, right? So we have to look for the helpers. I just want to make sure that you guys know that there's a full directory of helpers called Master IEP Coaches that are available. So you can go look at masteripcoach.com. You'll see a little button at the top there that says find a Master IP Coach or directory. And you can go to that directory and you can see what Master IEP coaches are doing and how they're helping. And if you're thinking, but I want to be one of the helpers, I want to help parents find resources like this. I want to help them bring these new ideas to the table. I want to help them see the hope, the possibilities. I want to get away from that 1970s, 1990s, early 2000s education and really start jumping into what is possible. That's where you jump in to the Master IP Coach Fast Track. You take a fast track path to get into the Master IP Coach network. And that's where you learn all of the things that you need to be that helper for somebody else. So I want to encourage you. Let's start looking at dignity, inclusion, ambition. Let's start looking at what is possible for all of our learners to create an environment that is going to create an inclusive life. I'll see you guys next time on the Special Education Inner Circle podcast.